Workplace violence. It's all over the news. By now, we've all seen the headlines about the disgruntled employee bringing a gun to work. But the real story is harassment in the workplace. In its various forms, harassment affects more people in the workplace than violence. Over 16 million workers each year. In fact, many of those highly publicized incidents of violence started with workplace harassment. Watch and see. When we hear the word harassment, we immediately think of sexual harassment. But there are many other types of harassment as well. In general, harassment is any language or behavior that could be offensive or disturbing to someone.
Black people just are horrible at doing their job.
The subject of harassing remarks, gestures, or actions varies, but can include race, religion, national origin, age, sex, marital status, sexual orientation, or handicap. And, as you might guess, harassment and discrimination can be closely related. Wherever you find one, you may find the other. Remarks such as, "You can't teach an old dog new tricks," can be considered harassment.
Excuse me?
If this sort of attitude influences decisions regarding employment, such as hiring, raises, and promotions, then it's age discrimination. Racial slurs and ethnic jokes continue unfair stereotypes, which can give rise to discrimination. They single people out on the basis of race or national origin and can influence important decisions in the workplace. Some people try to dismiss things like verbal abuse and threatening behavior by saying it's part of the job or it comes with the territory. Others think that victims of harassment are just being too sensitive. But threats, verbal abuse, and other forms of harassment can create a hostile work environment. Even innocent jokes, gags, and horseplay can lead to hurt feelings, or physical injuries if things don't go as planned. When harassment goes unreported and uninvestigated, violence can be the final outcome. So we need to put a stop to harassment before things go too far. Let's start with the basics. Teasing and jokes between co-workers often start with innocent intentions. Other times, verbal jabs are used to test boundaries or push buttons.
Well, I do know what his problem was. I mean, he was black.
Unfortunately, this kind of behavior can quickly cross the line into verbal abuse, such as mocking, bullying, and intimidation. When this behavior becomes hurtful or offensive, it can be considered harassment.
Okay, I gotta go.
Sometimes people don't realize that others find their behavior disturbing or offensive. So it's important to let someone know when they cross your line. This is the best way to prevent misunderstandings.
Earlier about the black people, you're talking about now Mexicans.
Remember, what may be amusing to one person could be taken very seriously by another. For instance, ethnic jokes can be taken personally by members of the ethnic group that is the brunt of the joke. Only one person needs to be offended for it to be considered harassment. People don't usually mean any harm when they play practical jokes, but sometimes these gags can backfire. Hurt feelings or even painful injuries could be the end result. And if a practical joke was intended to single out or make an example of someone, it could be considered harassment. Remember, it's important to tell someone when you find their behavior offensive. But if you ask them to stop and the harassment continues, don't get involved in a shouting match. If an argument develops, stay calm. Suggest getting a neutral person involved. If all else fails, walk away from the situation.
Now, I think you need to get this closet straightened out.
Sometimes, no matter what you do, you won't be able to end the problem. And it may even grow worse. So we need to take a look at what can happen when verbal harassment gets more intense and what we can do to stop it.
Straighten people out. Tell them they've got to do it. There's no urgency.
Threats are the most common example of intense verbal harassment. They can be veiled, conditional, or direct. Veiled or hidden threats suggest that someone intends to do harm without actually spelling it out.
If the place burned down, I'd be happy with that. What? Yeah, man, I don't care less. If there's something planned, I don't care.
You need to know.
Conditional threats are intended to scare people into doing something or not doing something.
Get it done today, or else.
Direct threats are clear statements of intention to do harm.
Or I'm really going to get you. I'm telling you. Leave me alone. I'm going to get...
The best way to put a stop to this type of behavior is to report it. So, report all threats, direct, conditional, or veiled. In fact, you should report any kind of verbal abuse or other form of harassment you receive or witness. Sometimes, people don't want to be a tattletale and get anyone in trouble by reporting incidents. Others just don't want to get involved. But these kinds of problems rarely go away on their own. Making a report is your best opportunity to stop the harassing behavior once and for all. It's also the best way to prevent the situation from developing into something more serious, such as violence, stalking, even murder. So, report incidents of harassment to your supervisor, your human resources department, or your company's security personnel.
Yeah, that's something that...
Some companies even have an independent hotline or employee assistance program that let you make confidential reports. Local law enforcement agencies should also be notified of incidents involving threats of violence or physical assaults. Since verbal abuse, threats, and other forms of harassment can escalate, it's important to know how to handle situations involving violence.
Why are you getting so worked up over the fact that we didn't move?
Here's a typical scenario. Two co-workers have a disagreement. Their difference of opinion grows into an argument. The confrontation intensifies with insults, threats, and challenges. If the conflict is allowed to escalate to pushing, shoving, or other physical contact, it could end in a serious act of violence.
You're my boss. You can't touch me.
It was the other day.
I wasn't in there.
If you find yourself faced with an abusive or threatening person, try to stay at least 5 feet away from them and avoid any physical contact. Assume a non-threatening posture with your arms low. Stay calm. Don't argue, disagree, or be judgmental. Let them know you understand. If their harassing behavior continues, try to change the subject. If they shove, grab, or corner you, try to get away or call out for help. If they attempt to cause you bodily harm or even make a threatening gesture, it could be considered assault. And assault is a crime. Even if you aren't the one who started it, fighting can have serious consequences. You could get injured, suspended, or fired, possibly even arrested or sued by the other person. So, if someone challenges you to fight,
What's your deal?
turn them down.
I'm talking about my
If they
personal
push
life.
you,
It's my
don't
personal
even
life.
shove
You need
back.
to know
It
it's
could
my
escalate the
business.
confrontation to violence.
Stop talking behind my back.
If someone assaults
Not
you,
right.
try to get away
And inconsiderate.
or call
And none of
out.
your business. And
Help
you don't
is
even know
usually
what you're
nearby.
talking about. You have no idea what you're talking about.
Remember, assault is a crime and should be reported to local law enforcement agencies as well as your employer. Now, let's talk about a type of harassment you've probably heard a lot about, but may not know exactly how to handle.
Carol, how are you doing?
When you think of sexual harassment, you may automatically picture a male supervisor propositioning a female employee. However, there are a number of other situations that qualify as sexual harassment. The harasser could also be a coworker, someone who works for you, or even a customer, client, or vendor. And men aren't the only perpetrators. Women can also harass men. In some cases, the harasser can even be the same sex as the victim. In fact, the situation doesn't have to involve a proposition at all. Sexual harassment is any behavior that is sexually oriented or based on gender, which creates an offensive or hostile work environment. And just because a behavior isn't offensive to most people doesn't mean it's okay. Each individual is the judge of what they find offensive.
He took me to a strip club.
Furthermore,
One of the girls
sexual
actually put me
harassment
on stage.
affects
It
more
was
than
a
just the
crazy
person
time.
targeted by
Oh
the
my gosh, it
behavior.
was so much fun.
It can create a hostile work environment for anyone who witnesses
I'll
it,
catch you at lunch.
making everyone a potential
I
victim.
really don't think you should be talking about this at work.
Sexual harassment can take the form of sexist as well as sexual remarks, sexual advances, unwanted physical contact, or assigning menial or demeaning tasks based on gender. It can also include sexually suggestive objects or pictures, practical jokes based on gender, and pressure to be one of the guys or one of the girls. Remember, each and every individual decides what language and behavior they find offensive.
Office behavior, okay?
If someone's behavior makes you feel uncomfortable, it's important to let them know about it.
Had my eye on you.
This is the best way to prevent future incidents.
Mind stop massaging?
Without making
Feel
accusations,
a little uncomfortable.
be clear and concise about the types of behavior you consider unacceptable. It's also important to record each incident that occurs. If the behavior continues, even after you've expressed your concerns, you should report it to your company. Having a written record of examples will help them understand the situation. Ignoring sexual harassment and hoping it will just go away can have serious consequences. Harassing behavior that goes unreported or uninvestigated can lead to assault, rape, violence, even murder. That's another good reason to report incidents of sexual harassment. A behavior that is closely related to sexual harassment is stalking. Although it has traditionally been defined as following without proper authority, stalking can pose much greater threats than sexual harassment alone. While most people who express a romantic interest in someone will stop pursuing them if those feelings aren't returned, a stalker will become obsessed. This can turn into repeated, unwanted attention that often includes following the victim and other invasions of privacy. Often, a stalker will leave disturbing gifts, notes, or phone messages for their victim. If the target of their affections doesn't respond, they may intensify their efforts, escalating to threats or acts of violence. Some facilities respond to stalking by relocating the victim's workstation or changing the victim's work schedule. Either could discourage the stalker and make them lose interest. In extreme cases, a company might install a silent alarm or security camera at the victim's workstation, or even post a security guard nearby.
Hey, I know you're there, because I followed you home. Why don't you...
Never confront a stalker or return gifts that they give you. These may encourage the stalker to continue or provoke an act of violence. However, document each incident in case you need to take legal action later. If the unwanted attention continues, you may want to file a protection order, a legal document forbidding the stalker from pursuing you. If you have any reason to believe your life is in danger, contact the police immediately. As you can see, harassment can create a hostile working environment. It can make daily life on the job unbearable, and it can lead to incidents of violence. Let's review. Verbal abuse has no place at work. This includes teasing, ethnic slurs, and practical jokes. Report all threats. Everyone won't lead to violence, but any of them could. Never get involved in a fight. No matter who starts it, assault is a crime. Don't tolerate sexual harassment. Let people know when their behavior makes you feel uncomfortable. Never confront a stalker or return their gifts. You can't predict how they will react. Report any offensive behavior and make sure it gets documented. Harassment should never be considered part of the job. Treat others as you would want to be treated and ask them to do the same. It's only fair.